Good evening, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us for the City of Kingston's online engagement session for the 2022 budgets. Stay close. Our session will begin in just 1 minute. Welcome and thank you for taking the time to join the City of Kingston's online engagement session for the 2022 budgets. Joining us this evening is the Kingston Police. My name is Julie Lee Stitt, and I am a communications officer with the City of Kingston, and I am going to be moderating this evening's session. So this evening's session is live streamed and it is being recorded. You can follow the live stream on the City of Kingston's YouTube channel, which has now been shared to the city's social media feeds on Twitter and Facebook. This session, we have 13 people registered for this evening, and to protect your privacy, all participants have their video turned off and have been muted, and the chat functionality is also turned off. So you will still see the chat feature at the bottom of your screen, but we're going to be reserving that for IS&T troubleshooting. So more on that in the next slide. Technology woes, they hit all of us from time to time. I know I was struggling with some audio issues before we went live. But if you are familiar with the Zoom platform, which many of us are these days, you do have the ability to adjust your view options. So you're able to see the presentation as well as the speaker, and this can be a very nice feature in Zoom. However, my recommendation is that if you're not familiar with Zoom, then perhaps you just leave it as you found it. If you do find yourself running into technology problems, again, there is the chat tool at the bottom, which we're reserving troubleshooting for this evening. So you can type your question to us there. However, sometimes the easiest and quickest solution is to log off and rejoin the meeting. And I also have the call-in number on the screen before you. So now if you have your phone handy, you might want to snap a picture of it, or if you have a pen and paper, jot it down, and it is 1587-328-1099. And the webinar ID is also posted on the screen, which is 975-6387-5116. And as I mentioned, we are live streaming to YouTube this evening. So that's another option. If you find yourself disconnected, you can join the meeting via YouTube. So asking questions, we have a great presentation this evening and a lot of information to get through. However, we do have the Q&A tool at the bottom, and at any point during the session, you can ask a question in writing by typing it into the Q&A tool at the bottom of your screen. Your name and the question will be visible to all participants. If you are joining us by phone, or if it's simply your preference, you can ask your question verbally during the Q&A period, which will come after the presentation, and in which case I would enable your microphone. So if you are joining us by phone this evening, and I don't think I saw that anyone was, however, if you do get disconnected and you rejoin by phone, what you would do is you would press *6, and that would trigger the raise hand function, at which point I would enable your audio so you could ask your question. Q&A responses will be shared in the project reporting out document. And I just want to also remind all attendees that we currently have a survey open until August 9th on the city's public engagement website, which you can access at www.getinvolved.cityofkingston.ca. So if you have not already done the survey, I encourage you to do so. And one thing, if I can just give a quick plug, you're in the room tonight, which is great, but I did mention that we are live streaming to YouTube and we have shared social media about that. So if you happen to have your Twitter or your Facebook open as well, if you want to share that post as well so more people are aware of this evening's session, that would be great and much appreciated. So now on the screen before you, you will see the city's guidelines for participation. And these were actually developed by the city in collaboration with the community. So I'm going to give everyone a minute to just read over the guidelines for participation on the screen. To confirm that everyone agrees, we would ask that if you are not in agreement, please raise your hand using the raise hand function, which you'll find in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen, or again, if you're joining by phone, that would be the *6 button. Thank you. So seeing no objections to the guidelines for participation, we will proceed to this online engagement session. I am now going to pass the presentation over to the Chief Financial Officer and City Treasurer, Desiree Kennedy.
Thanks, Julie Lee. Welcome everyone to our third installment of the 2022 City Budget virtual sessions. For those of you that are attending for the first time this year, we did receive feedback from last year's budget engagement sessions that confirmed they were a little bit long, a little too much information, and perhaps not as much opportunity for questions and discussion. So in response to that, this year we now have included in our engagement process 4 different and more focused sessions on specific service areas that were of particular interest based on some of the feedback from last year's process. If you missed our first 2 sessions on Recreation and Leisure Services and the Cataraqui Region Conservation Authority, you will be able to find the recorded sessions online at our getinvolved.cityofkingston.ca page, where you can just select 2022 City Budget Engagement, and you can listen to the presentations and some of the Q&A and discussion portions. Tonight, we welcome Chief Anjte McNeely from the Kingston Police. But before we get going on that and hand that over to the Chief, Julie Lee, next slide. You will have lots of opportunity tonight to have your say on how your tax dollars are being spent. Citizen engagement and feedback is important to us. It can help us to improve performance by better understanding what the public wants with respect to services and service levels, particularly in the context of limited resources, as we're all used to. We recognize that the municipal budgeting process is a broad concept with many inputs into the process, and it can definitely benefit from your input. But in order to manage that, we have provided on this slide some possible themes that will just help to provide some context and summarize some of what we're hoping to hear from the community. We do support a continuous improvement culture at the city, and in support of that, we've got 2 themes that we've sort of summarized here on the slide. And this is the type of thing that we're certainly looking for in terms of some feedback from the public tonight. So first of all, effectiveness of the services and the service levels. So talking about Kingston Police tonight, thinking about is the agency providing the right services, what the community needs, and are they providing those services at the right level? Should there be more or less investment in those services? Are the services meeting the objectives and the needs of the community? And are there services or service levels that are not required? We're also looking at efficiency of services and thinking of efficiency in services in terms of value for money. So, is there a better way for the agency to provide these services more efficiently? Are there things that we could do differently and still provide that same level of service? So, that just provides you with a little bit of context in terms of some of the feedback that we're hoping to receive. Next slide, Julie Lee. So, in terms of what you're going to hear tonight, you'll be hearing from Chief McNeely on a number of service and budget related topics as it relates to the Kingston Police. We're going to ask the Chief to give us a bit of an overview of the agency's services and their service levels, what their current priorities and initiatives are going forward. We're going to ask a little bit about her budget, how the services are funded, including property taxation and other revenue sources. And then we're going to end up with looking at some of the budget challenges and the strategies that Kingston Police are using. Once the Chief is finished, then we'll have an opportunity certainly for feedback and discussion and Q&A, as Julie Lee has mentioned. So Chief McNeely, welcome. And next slide, please, Julie Lee. So to start things off, wondering if you could tell us what types and levels of services you're providing to the community.
So to begin with, the Kingston Police has an authorized strength of 211 sworn members, 61 full-time civilian members, and 28 part-time civilian members for a total complement of 300. From a broad perspective, we have 19 operational and administrative units within the Kingston Police, and I'll describe them at a high level. So beginning with our communications center, which includes our 911 operators, call takers, and dispatchers. Next is the uniform patrol, who are our first responders who call to respond to our calls for service. So within our patrol division, we have specialty officers who are trained in standardized field sobriety testing, and this is utilized in the enforcement of impaired driving by alcohol and drugs. We have the breath technicians for detecting impaired driving by alcohol, and they provide expert evidence in court. We have a drug recognition expert for enhanced investigations involving impaired driving by drugs, and they also provide expert evidence in court. We have a scenes of crime officers who can do initial evidence collection at scenes, and we have carbine operators who have specialized training in scene perimeter security at high-risk calls. The next area that we have is the alternative response unit, which assists our frontline officers by responding to non-emergency calls for service and providing follow-up investigations that are assigned to them. And they also review accident reports received by our collision reporting center. The emergency response unit, who not only form part of the first responders in patrol, but are also highly trained to respond to high-risk calls involving guns and weapons. They assist in entry for high-risk search warrants, and they have specialized training in negotiation, de-escalation, and specialized weapons. Each member must have just over 500 hours of training per year to keep up their skill sets. We also have the K9 unit. So we have DAC and BASC and their handlers who work in tandem with our emergency response unit and are called upon to locate missing persons, find suspects who have fled the scene, locate drugs, weapons, ammunition, to name but a few. Our criminal investigation division houses a number of specialty units, including the crimes against persons and property, fraud, vulnerable sector unit, sexual assault and child abuse unit, internet child exploitation unit, and major crime. Within this area, we also have a crime analyst and e-crime specialists who look at evidence in computers and cell phones, etc. And we have an internet child exploitation forensic specialist collecting evidence from computers again and cell phones in those investigations. We have a forensic identification unit who gather all the evidence for our crime scenes, from homicide investigations to break-ins and to everything in between. And our drug unit, our members focus on high-end investigations involving drug trafficking, drug manufacturing, as well as importing and exporting drugs. Our street crime unit are especially trained in human trafficking investigations, as well as prevention and education. They also provide support to our drug unit and criminal investigations unit and investigate street-level drug complaints. Next, we have our core units, also called our community-oriented response and engagement unit. They include our beat officers, who also rides Murray as part of our relationship building within the community and also does proactive investigations. A new position in our core office is the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Officer, who's taking the lead on relationship building within our community, as well as other equity-seeking populations. He's got specialized training in hate crimes and is the coordinator for our newly developed reassurance program, which I'll speak to a little bit later. Our traffic unit are included in CORE, who have specialists in accident reconstruction. They work collaboratively with the Ministry of Transportation and neighboring police partners and proactively address traffic complaints received from our community. School resource officers look after over 60 schools within our jurisdiction by providing specialized presentations and building relationships with our youth. We have a community programs officer and we have a youth programs officer. We have also media in our core unit, as well as our community volunteers, who are the eyes and ears for our police and community and offer specialty programs as well. Next, I'd like to highlight our training unit, which includes our wellness and our peer support coordinator. And they provide all our use of force training and requalifications to our members. They facilitate enhanced training opportunities that are held on site. They update our members on new case law and ensure health and wellness, as well as resiliency training in all parts of our training initiatives. Professional standards and quality assurance investigates complaints against police and fulfill the mandated audits that must be done on an annual basis. Information technology ensures that our organization is running smoothly, that we are kept safe from cyber attacks, and ensuring that we have the most up-to-date technology and storage of data. Looking for the transition also to the province-wide new NG 911 system. Our human resources looks after our hiring, recruiting, HR policies and procedures, make sure labor laws are adhered to, looks after payroll, long-term absences, and health and safety. Finance is responsible for preparing budgets, paying bills, and also doing audits as well. Our records management is responsible for responding to freedom of information requests pertaining to records that are held at our police department. They're providing background checks for our community, looking after and maintaining all of our records, alarm response policies, and CPIC entries. Our courts unit, they do our prisoner transportation, court security, and they manage all the briefs that are provided by all the members within our organization, and they do the disclosure to our Crown's office. They ensure the quality of our reports and coding for statistical purposes, serving of summons and subpoenas, and the provincial processing of tickets. We also have cell monitors who ensure the health and well-being of our prisoners that are held in our cells prior to release or being brought to court. And we have our front desk who answer non-emergent calls or direct appropriate calls to our communications unit and also take reports. They monitor and transfer reports that are made online on our online reporting system. And two other units that we have that are co-located in our office, in our headquarters, are the Victim Services of Kingston and Frontenac, as well as our Collision Reporting Center. So just to give you a little bit of information about our statistics, in 2020, members in our communities answered, in our communication center, answered 55,300 calls, and they were 911 calls for service, so police, fire, and ambulance. In 2020, our officers responded to just over 50,000 overall calls for services, including their online reports, the reports filed, and dispatched calls for service. And our frontline officers respond to over 25,000 calls for service. In terms of motor vehicle collisions, in 2020, we investigated 2,257 in total, and that was a decrease from 2019, likely as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2021 year to date, the first 6 months, we've responded to just under 1,000 motor vehicle collisions. Also in 2020, our accident reconstructionists respond to 9 accidents where there's serious injury or death occurring. And in 2021, so far, we've responded to 11.
Thanks, Chief. That's a very extensive range of services, and I expect, like other agencies and city departments, you most likely face challenges of increasing demand for services and limited resources. So looking forward, can you provide further information to us on what your current priorities and initiatives are?
Okay. I think we're on to the next slide. Yes, thank you very much. The objectives funded by the 2021 budget align with our 5 priorities that are going to be shown on this slide as well as on the next slide. These objectives are over and above all the work that's being done in our organization, as mentioned at the beginning of my presentation. So under the first priority, design new ways to deal with challenging social trends. The following things is what we're doing in 2021. So we have a mobile crisis rapid response team, or MCERT, and we have a crisis outreach and support team. And this is all about mental health and addictions. And we have this model partners police with addictions and mental health workers to better serve individuals who are experiencing mental health and addictions crisis in the City of Kingston. And this was launched in October of 2019 and made possible by a 3-year community safety and policing grant from April 2019 to April of 2022. And this grant is for $712,000 per year for 3 years for a total of $2.1 million. And this service was initially available to our community for a maximum of 16 out of the 24-hour period. But I'm pleased to say that this has expanded now to over 20 hours available based on the call volume in 2021. Also in September of 2020, as part of our same funding, we have the Health IM mobile program that was launched. And this system is based on a clinical risk screening tool and gives police access to medical checklists to assess a person's risk level for self-harm, harm to others, and for inability to care for themselves. This allows police to form evidence-based risk decisions, communicate with local healthcare, offer referrals to community mental health and supports, and to document on-scene clinical observations. So if a person is apprehended under the Mental Health Act and taken to the hospital for assessment, the officer's on-scene observations and grounds for apprehension are securely and wirelessly communicated to the hospital's triage nursing station ahead of arrival. The benefits from this program will allow for more informed decision-making at the front end of the interaction with the person in crisis. It's better wraparound care for the person, fewer mental health apprehensions with an increase in direct referrals to community partners, and shorter wait times at the hospital for our officers when an apprehension does occur. We have seen a reduction in apprehension rates from 46% in 2019 to 38% in 2021. In terms of hospital wait times for our officers, it was over 2 hours in 2019 and has averaged out to about an hour in 2021. In addition, we are currently in the final stages of entering into a memorandum of understanding with Addictions Mental Health Services, Kingston, Frontenac, Lennox, and Addington, to allow for diversion of lower priority mental health calls for service that don't have a risk safety matter to the public and are not criminal in nature. It's anticipated that this will divert a percentage of calls away from the frontline response, allowing for increased officer availability for higher priority calls for service, as well as other proactive measures. Another measure that we're doing that falls under the first priority is a response to the opioid epidemic. And Kingston Police recognizes that the issue of substance misuse and addiction is a public health matter, and therefore we support a collaborative 4-pillar approach to this. That is prevention, education, harm reduction, treatment, and enforcement. In terms of enforcement, our drug unit focuses on individuals and organized crime groups that traffic and illegally manufacture and import drugs into our community, including fentanyl and crystal meth. In terms of training, we are educating our members on trauma-informed care and adverse childhood experiences to bring an understanding to the complex social issues of mental health and addictions through a public health lens. The second priority is the implementing a new evidence-informed policing and staffing model. So we've just implemented a staffing model that was evidence-based, and we've just started that this year. But in addition to that, members of our specialty units will continue to be trained in technology-based courses, including cybercrimes, to assist them in their investigations. And our traffic enforcement unit continues to pursue strategic traffic enforcement through use of analytics from the Collision Reporting Center, as well as collaboration and participation with city partners and the Regional Coroner's Office in the Fatal Collision Review Committee when motor vehicle fatalities occur. The next slide, please. So under the priority of recruit, retain, and develop the best policing team possible, I'm going to comment a bit about training, professional development, and member wellness. So in 2021, this includes the continuation of the cultural competency training, which was a toolkit to support respectful workplaces and service to the public. That began in 2020 and has been rolled out to the rest of our organization in 2021. Our training also entails a number of new initiatives, including online certificate course for our supervisors from Laurier University on positive psychology. Peer support training has been provided by Wounded Warriors Canada called Before Occupational Stress. As well, we'll be hosting a Train the Trainer course in their trauma resilience program, which will also be opened up to our other first responders. On July 16th, our peer support team launched a new app called Kingston Police Peer Connect, which gives members and their families access to the peer support team, as well as access to health and wellness articles, resources, self-assessment tools, and events. So under safeguarding our reputation, investing in relationships, we're looking at pursuing authentic working relationships with our community and provincial partners. And in 2021, members of the Kingston Police have partnered with the Provincial Hate Crime Extremism Investigative Team, which will enhance our capacity to investigate hate crimes and strengthen our partnership with the other members of the team, which include 16 other police services. Identified members of the Kingston Police have also received specialized training on hate crimes and related issues. Constable Brian McMillan, who is our Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Officer, has just received and initiated the Reassurance Program, which has been developed to ensure that members of our community who are victimized by hate-motivated crimes and incidents receive the necessary supports, safety planning, and education as required as part of our service delivery, and will include services provided by our community partners. This is in addition to any ongoing criminal investigation that is occurring. This position also includes an outreach to our recruitment outreach, actually, to attract more young and diverse people of diverse backgrounds to the policing vocation. As of November 1st, 2020, and as part of our 2021 strategic plan, the Kingston Police have seconded one of our members to the OPP Joint Forces Human Trafficking Team for the East Region. This team's goal is to identify, investigate, and disrupt human trafficking and child exploitation organizations operating in Ontario and address the threat of organized crime. We have also had a success story in which our officer played an integral role in locating a male who was wanted on several outstanding warrants pertaining to human trafficking. Currently, there are 25 human trafficking cases before the courts in the East Region, and this crime is very much an underreported crime to police, and our school resource officers, as well as our street crime and our victim services, have received additional training to educate school-age children from grade 7 and on, as well as to those who are not in the educational system, but may be part of the shelter system, on how to protect themselves from being victimized. In January of 2021, the Kingston Police partnered with Dr. Anjte McNeely and relied on her expertise as a cross-cultural expert and founder of Mosaic Cross-Cultural Solutions and the Badges to Bridges law enforcement program to support us with our strategic planning on equity, diversity, inclusion, and indigenization. This began with a review of specific policies and procedures through an EDI and human rights and legal lens. This past spring, Dr. Jack Davies led preliminary consultations with members of Kingston's Black community. These consultations provided me and my leadership team with invaluable information, and we used this as a guiding point in the creation of a new partnership with Kingston Community Health Centers. This partnership was publicly launched a week ago with a goal to host a series of community consultations this fall focused on equity, diversity, inclusion, and indigenization. These consultations will help the Kingston Police to learn more about Kingston residents through a dialogue focused on building and mending relationships. Ultimately, this partnership will inform the creation of the Community Inclusion Council, which will be a new advisory body to the Chief and the Police Services Board that will bring together community members and the Kingston Police. Plans are underway for the council to be created in early of 2022, and I can provide more information to the community in the upcoming months. The next steps include the development of an EDI internal working group within our organization, made up of a cross-section of members of the Kingston Police to bring matters of importance to the attention of the senior leadership team. We will also work towards developing an EDI webpage, and will continue planning the consultations with KCHC this fall. And then finally, there to build capacity for high performance in a changing world, we do focus on technology, and technology plays an important role in providing efficiencies to policing. For example, in 2021, we've budgeted for leveraging advances in technology in electronic ticketing, where the swipe of a driver's license will auto-populate the ticket information. We're also looking at, in terms of the traffic unit, electronic submissions of our motor vehicle collision reports from the cruisers to the collision reporting center, and improving technology used to reconstruct accident scenes. In addition, the Kingston Police, KCHC, and City of Kingston have partnered with a startup company, Spectra Plasmatics, to help develop drug detection technology that can identify the type of drug and cutting agents in a particular sample, and to initiate a pilot project in our community to help prevent overdoses and deaths.
Thanks, Chief. So since this is a budget session, I'm sure our participants would be interested in knowing what it costs to provide policing services to the community and how you fund those costs. Can you give us a feel for what your operating and capital budgets look like?
Okay, so if you can have the next slide, please. Thank you. So in this slide really shows that in 2008, the city's net tax budget was $149,900,000, of which $30 million was spent on policing, and that equates to about 20.04%. In 2020, the city's next tax budget was $242,100,000, of which $43.5 million was spent on policing, which equates to 17.9%. So over the last 13 years, the police budget as a percent of net taxes raised by the city has dropped from 20.04% to 17.97%. And this represents a 10.3% reduction. So really our police budget as a percentage of net taxes raised is not increasing. Proportionally, we're receiving less of what the city raises in taxes. Next slide, please. So how much is invested in policing to keep our members and our community safe? Our total operating costs are $45.2 million, which has been reduced to $41.1 million through outside revenues, which are $4.1 million. So this represents a net increase of 3.62% over the 2020 budget, which equates to $1.4 million. What impacted our revenues was the reduction of 2 grants from the provincial government by a value of $427,000, of which we have no control over. And this automatically increased our budget by about 1%. It's important to note that overall wages and benefits account for 86.1% of the total operating budget costs, which leaves very little room to pay for additional operational matters. Our police budget is informed by our strategic plan and the 2021 objectives that I have already outlined for you. And our capital budget, I can speak to the capital side of the house. The 2021 capital budget is $910,000, which is within the envelope that the city has set aside for us. Our biggest requirement cost is fleet, where we will be replacing a number of vehicles throughout the organization at a cost of $470,000. For IT, a total of $170,000 is set aside for refreshing desktop computers, portable radio batteries, and for infrastructure to support Zoom room installations. And finally, $170,000 is set aside for critical incident equipment. On average, we spend about $700,000 per year for fleet replacement, $1.2 million on IT projects, $100,000 on building maintenance, which is a total of about $2 million per year. But for our 2021 capital budget, working collaboratively with CFO and City Treasurer Desiree Kennedy, Kingston Police reduced our budget request by about $1 million so that the city could invest additional money into affordable housing and other council strategic priorities. As a result, some of our capital projects were deferred to following years.
Thanks, Chief. Next slide, please. So a 2-part question, just to provide a bit more context for those particularly that may have some questions or providing some input. It'd be useful to understand what kinds of budget challenges do you face and what strategies do you utilize in trying to address those challenges?
So forecasting our budget is very difficult at this time due to the following risks, many of which are outside of police and municipal control. So in terms of revenues, we have assumed that background check revenues will return to pre-COVID levels in 2021. In addition, in 2020, the Ministry of the Solicitor General of Ontario has commissioned a review of the court security and prisoner transportation transfer payment program. So unofficially, we had been advised that the transfer payments would remain status quo for 2021. But the $1.3 million is a potential risk to the budget. So as it turns out, we've just recently received information that our portion of the grant was reduced by $65,000 in 2021. Government policy changes, such as the regulations for the new Comprehensive Ontario Police Services Act, may impact future budgets. There is an indication that they may be completed early in 2022. And the impact of globalization and what occurs in other countries cannot be understated, as those incidents have a potential to affect our local communities, such as demonstrations, vigils, protests. These have the potential to arise spontaneously as a result of social media communications. And the costs associated with long-term absences and staffing impact our budget and are difficult to predict. The COVID-19 pandemic has impacted the Kingston Police budget in terms of costs associated with personal protective equipment, infrastructure to accommodate working from home, overtime to backfill sickness or self-isolation due to contact tracing, and additional duties in relation to the EMCPA and ROA, those are the emergency orders, in terms of engagement, education, enforcement, to name but a few. The costs associated with being a 24/7 operation is also impacting us, and the only agency to respond to calls related to mental health, addictions, homelessness, and poverty after certain hours. In terms of what budget strategies that we have implemented, we're looking after the number one really is looking after our members. It's a priority. And that's why we continue to budget for wellness initiatives and PTSD prevention programs for our members to ensure we remain healthy and resilient in the face of adversity. This includes the availability of peer supporters and their training, wellness check-ins by a psychologist, enhanced early intervention programs from a psychologist to our specialty units. We have an on-site psychologist, comprehensive EAP programs, the evolution of psychological in the health place to organizational and individual resilience, as well as our new peer support app. These mitigating factors help reduce absences that we are not able to hire over for because we cover the salary dollars. So it's really important in terms of, for our budget, is really to focus on our members' health. Cost savings by hiring new recruits to replace retirees occurs. And the money saved here can sometimes allow us to hire over to compensate for those away on long-term absences. We're very diligent in regularly monitoring by our finance director of our expenses and our overtime costs, which is very important. And advocacy for policing and partnerships with the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police and the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police for sustainable funding through grants. We also have new regulations which address issues such as suspension without pay in certain circumstances. We have efficiencies that are gained through the mandated community safety and well-being plans, which City Council adopted in their June 22nd, 2021 council meeting. And we're hoping that those efficiencies will come to light as well as we work through that. This speaks to community partnerships and engagement to create new ways to respond to calls for service that do not require police attendance, such as I mentioned, the partnership with our crisis teams to respond to persons in crisis where it is not a public safety matter. And finally, researching and utilizing technology to enhance efficiencies is always important.
Wow. We're going to let Chief McNeely take a drink because she just went over a ton of information, and we are at our question period, so I'm going to go into that very quickly, but I just want to let everyone know that this evening's recording, as I mentioned, it's being live streamed to the City of Kingston's YouTube channel, so you could be joining us there now. You can also access the recording at any point after this evening's meeting, and we will be sharing it to our Get Involved Kingston project page, which you can access at www.getinvolved.cityofkingston.ca, because I know we went over a ton of excellent information and you'll probably want to revisit it, and you will have the opportunity to do so. But now is time for questions. So I invite everyone in attendance, if you have a question, you can enter it now into the Q&A tool, which you will find at the bottom of your screen. And your name will be visible to other participants. Alternatively, if you are joining us by phone this evening, you have the option to press *6. Also, attendees who are logged on can also trigger the raise hand function if they want to ask their question verbally. So I'm just going to give participants a little moment to to pop in any questions that you may have. Again, we went over a lot of information, and I know right at the top, Desiree did a good job in kind of outlining the purpose of this evening session, just to trigger some thoughts that people might have. So if you do have any questions, now would be the time to pose them. We have all the experts in the room. You know, Chief, actually, I'm just wondering, as we wait for others to pop some questions into the Q&A tool at the bottom of the screen, I'm just wondering, you had mentioned a memorandum of understanding with regards to a diversion program, which kind of I was quite curious about, and I was wondering if you'd be able to tell me and other attendees a little bit more about that MOU and that diversion program that Kingston Police is working on.
Well, we're just in the works of reviewing.
Oh, Chief, I'm just going to have you turn on your audio. Sorry about that.
Someone had to be that person. So yes, this memorandum of understanding is still being fleshed out, and the details are still being worked on. But really, it's a way for when a call comes in to be able to divert it to a crisis team for their appropriate response. And obviously, if they get that call and it doesn't fit within their mandate, then it will get sent back to us, obviously, and we will respond as per we would normally do. So it's really a way of trying this out and to see how that works. But we want to make sure that we've got the legalities there properly addressed. So again, still on the works.
Absolutely. Thank you for expanding on that a little bit for us. And just a reminder to all attendees, you know, this is a great opportunity to bring your questions forward. We have our City Treasurer and Chief Financial Officer, Desiree Kennedy, joining us. We have Chief McNeely, two very well-informed individuals around Kingston Police and then city budgets. So if you do have any questions, I encourage you to bring them to the floor.
Thanks, Julie. I was going to try to put a question in there and it wouldn't let me. So I don't know if you locked me out or what. I'm not allowed to ask questions, but just a couple things, a question and maybe just a comment first, just to expand on something that the chief mentioned that folks might be interested in, just in terms of our annual budget process with police and with some of the other agencies as well. So just in terms of how we work with the agencies, folks may be aware that council gives us a target for budget in terms of a tax increase. And that information is also provided to agencies, including Kingston Police. And the agencies work with us to determine how we're going to meet those targets. So it's definitely a partnership in terms of the process itself. And the chief mentioned, I think, when she was going through some of the capital budgets, why the 2021 capital budget was so much lower than what their average was. And that's been the case, actually, I think the last couple of years, because we did need to find some capital monies to fund some of council's other strategic priorities. And so the police definitely came forward and looked through theirs and deferred a number of things in order to help the city meet those targets overall. So there is definitely a partnership and a process around these budgets with the agencies, and they work very closely with the city in terms of trying to meet council's targets and trying to fund the overall strategic priorities. So Chief, just a question that I know has been asked a couple times because of some recent media. I understand that the police just purchased an armored vehicle. And I know there was some questions as to what that vehicle might be used for. So maybe you can shed some light on that in terms of what the plans are for that armored vehicle.
And Chief, before you answer, I'm just going to mention that this question did come up in the Q&A as well. Astrid asked if we could you tell us about the $265 armored rescue vehicle? So yes, a very timely question. So if you could provide a little more detail on that, I know a lot of people are interested.
Yes, this armored rescue vehicle is a replacement vehicle for a decommissioned one that we had, which did not meet the ballistic needs for our community and our police. And the cost came out of the capital budget, not the operating budget. And the vehicle is specific to our emergency response unit and will only be used in high-risk situations and for training exercises, for training purposes as they work together. It's not used for everyday deployment. And we've taken a measured approach in purchasing this replacement vehicle. Since our own vehicle was decommissioned in 2017, we were in the interim looking for grant funding, which was not available. And so it just so happened the opportunity presented itself, and we did not want to wait until tragedy happened. So we were able to purchase this vehicle with a request for proposal that went out. And again, this vehicle vastly improves our officers' capabilities when dealing with armed individuals, both in urban and rural settings. It allows the officers to achieve cover when there is no cover available. They can negotiate and de-escalate from a position of cover. It allows officers to move directly into harm's way to rescue citizens and officers who've been injured and take them out of harm's way. The vehicle can also be used in coordination with other emergency service partners, such as the Frontenac Paramedic Service and the Kingston Fire and Rescue, as well as neighboring emergency partners. So this vehicle is all about officer and public safety and will allow us to immediately meet the needs of our officers and community members to make timely interventions when necessary. We must be prepared to address low frequency, high risk incidents to ensure the safety of our citizens and our members. So just saving one life is money well spent.
Thank you for that response, Chief McNeely. And Astrid, thank you for bringing that question forward too. And you had also asked as part of your question what its uses will be, which the Chief covered. So I appreciate that. And again, Astrid, thank you for that question. Desiree, thank you for explaining the departments and the agencies and the city relationship too, because, you know, we're having these virtual budget sessions and we're meeting with departments and we're meeting with agencies. And I know sometimes there can be a little bit of confusion around the relationship and the difference between the two. So that was very helpful context, and thank you for that. So I'm just going to remind our attendees that if you do have any questions, there is the Q&A tool at the bottom of your screen. You can type your question in that way, or you also have the option to use the raise hand function, and I can enable your audio so you can ask your question verbally. So at this time, we have no open questions. So we'll keep the meeting open for a couple of more minutes in the event that more questions do come in. And one thing to note is, you know, in the previous engagements we've had as well, a lot of questions have been coming in, and sometimes they fall a little bit outside the scope of the session that we're having. But all the questions are recorded and they do go into a report that Financial Services will be preparing and sharing with Council. So even if a point brought forward may not fall within the scope of budget, it doesn't mean that it's not being noted and shown to the right people. So I just wanted to mention that. And again, this recording will be available on our Get Involved Kingston page. And you can visit Get Involved Kingston at www.getinvolved.cityofkingston.ca. And I don't want to steal any wind from her sails because Desiree is going to be talking about some upcoming engagement sessions. So no spoilers from me, but a little bit of a teaser perhaps in that we are going to be actually at the market this weekend. So I just wanted to put that out there, but that's all I'm going to say about it for now. So do stay on the line to find out more. Okay, seeing no new questions, we are going to advance the presentation. I know there was a lot of information covered, so if there is some information that you would like to share moving forward, I would remind everyone that we do have an open survey on our engagement platform, and it is open until 4 p.m. on August 9th. And also, since the pandemic, there's also the option to call in to complete the survey. And I've memorized the number and it's quite easy. It's 613-546-0000. I think I got 4 zeros there. And if not, it's 4 zeros. And you can complete the survey by phone, and you also have the option to request the survey in writing. And we have received a nice comment from Carla. So Carla, thank you very much for that. Carla mentioned that the information was well explained. So that is something that we are aiming for. And I noticed that in Chief McNeely's presentation as well. There was a lot of great detail there, and it gives a very good overview of what Kingston Police is actively doing day to day. So we are going to advance to the next slide, and I'm going to turn the show back over to Desiree.
Thanks, Julie Lee. So we continually, as we embark on some of the budget engagement initiatives, we get questions on what we're going to do with the feedback and the input, and how does it impact budgets. So I just thought I'd cover off a little bit about next steps. First of all, in terms of the input that we receive, whether through comments and questions through these virtual sessions, through the survey, and through other means, staff will be reviewing and summarizing all of the inputs that is received, and putting that into a report that will be available both to the community and to council. And that'll be a summary of the feedback that will help council in terms of as they start to think about budget deliberations, which will actually be happening in November for the 2022 budget. So definitely your feedback will have impact in that regard. The information will be getting to council. It will be available to the community. In terms of the timing, we're actually concurrently doing some of this engagement process with our budget development process. So we're just kicking off this month for the 2022 budget process. Departments are starting to look at the projections that they had last year for 2022 and updating those. And they will be submitting in mid-September, they'll be submitting their 2022 budget. So any feedback that we're getting currently, we do have a process where we are starting to provide that information back to the department. So it's quite timely. The departments will have any relevant information from the feedback that we're getting, and can incorporate into the 2022 budgets. What we're also finding quite often, though, is that the feedback may also relate to future year budgets. And so they'll have that information in terms of preparing not only the 2022 budgets, but the next 3 years of operating projections that they'll be preparing. So certainly you can be assured that your input will be influencing and impacting future year budgets. Next slide, please, Julie Lee. So Julie Lee did steal a little bit of my thunder there in terms of what's coming up. So we do have one more virtual budget session next Monday night at 5:30. We'll be joined by Director Ruth Nordegraff, who's the director of our Housing and Social Services Department. And so she'll be providing us some information on the services and the budgets with respect to housing, social services, and childcare. So definitely one not to miss. There should be lots of information coming for that night. As Julie Lee said, we're also going to be doing some in-person pop-ups in Market Square. So we will be at Market Square on July the 24th, this upcoming Saturday. So come on out and chat with us about anything budget related that you like. And we'll also be there again on August the 5th. So we look forward to finally being able to see people in person with our proper social distancing. But look forward to meeting with you and talking all things budget at one of those too. So come on out and meet with us. Also, as Julie mentioned, we've got our survey, which is open until August the 9th. Please go on to the getinvolved.cityofkingston.ca website, or call 613-546-0000 and fill out the survey and have your say with respect to our budgets.
Desiree, you just rhymed that phone number off like it was so easy. Thank you for that. So before we let you go, a huge thank you from the project team for spending part of your Monday evening with us. And we have one final request of you, and that is that you complete our poll. And I'm going to ask my colleague Colin to launch the poll, and it's going to appear on the screen before you. And what I uncovered is that you have to answer every question for the poll to successfully submit. And the reason why I'm asking you to complete this poll is because it helps us improve our process. So if you've attended a session previously, you'll know that we started hosting these virtual engagements as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. It forced us to be innovative and think on our feet. And we started introducing these virtual formats. And we think they're going pretty well, but we recognize there's room for improvement. So if you could please complete the poll on the screen before you, then it will help us serve you better, which is what we're here to do. So we are seeking 100% participation. So please cast your ballot. And again, we'll be reviewing the results and seeing how we can tweak and improve what we're doing so that our engagements match your expectations. And again, I just want to thank everyone for spending part of their Monday evening with us. I know it's a hot, sticky day out there, and you might be searching for a breeze rather than looking at your screen or calling in. But these are important sessions, and this is an important engagement, and your feedback is vital. And I know the project team appreciates it very much. So thank you. So we have just a couple more people to complete the poll. So we'll keep it up there for 20 more seconds. Okay. Colin, if you could please end the polling. And again, thank you for spending your Monday evening with us. Have a great week. And if you can, join us again next week for our final session with the Housing and Social Services Department. Thank you. Good night.